Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode number 131 of Let's Go Racing. Tyler Jones and Dominic Aragon here with you. Thanks for joining us. Short show today, as David is busy with some obligations this week, getting ready for the Tony Stewart smoke show going at Texas Motor Speedway, and no guest this week. But Dominic and I still wanted to make a point to get you guys some content and just bring you some headlines, talk about what's going on in the NASCAR playoffs. So not going to be the full-on show you normally would expect, but didn't want to leave you guys without something. And so with that, Dominic, appreciate the time as always, my friend, and you joining us. Dom, let's get right to it. AJ Allmendinger wins at the ROVAL, was very emotional. And, you know, you and I were talking before the show. This is a unique situation because Kaulig Racing has not had the success that they would have hoped for, right? Justin Haley's leaving at the end of the year, going to Rick Ware Racing. AJ Allmendinger was hoping to get a win at one of these road courses at some point this year, getting the playoff. It now finally happens. And hearing him say afterwards, like, you know, you just never know in the Cup Series when this is going to be the last one. I don't know if that's the last win for AJ Allmendinger in the Cup Series or not. I think there's probably a good chance that is. But if that's the way he went out, like I mean, those type of moments that you could feel it and understand for that raw emotion, because that's a lot of work for AJ Allmendinger and that Kaulig Racing team that has been together for a long time to get to this point.
Well, that commitment that Kaulig Racing has had with AJ Allmendinger and pulling him from the broadcast booth, was it 2019 or 2020? It might have been during the pandemic for a partial schedule, and Chris Rice wanted to work with him so bad, and they pieced together some wins. They win at Atlanta, a non-road course track. He gets full-time in the Xfinity Series, leaves the broadcast booth altogether, and then goes back Cup racing. This is his first full-time Cup year since 2019, I believe. So it's been a long time since Allmendinger had been in Cup running on Sundays. And a lot of these driver's seats have been filled for 2024, but one that has not been filled yet has been that number 16 car. And you hear AJ's comments on TV, and then I went back and read through what he had to say at the post-race press conference. So they do their interview with TV, they go to Victory Lane, and they go meet with the media for about 30 minutes. Every race winner does this, Xfinity, Truck, Cup Series. And Allmendinger's in there saying, you know, they have Chris Rice and Matt Kaulig in there too, and reporters are pressing him. So what's going on with the 16 car next year? And there's no answer. You would think, Tyler, if he's your guy, if he's returning in 2024, you put that all to rest right there in that press conference, like how Joe Gibbs did about 2 months ago, that, hey, Danny Hamlin is going to be back. And this is that even though nothing had been signed. Chris Rice said there would be a press conference. AJ Allmendinger just said, hey, we've won a Cup race. We're celebrating a Cup win. So you see all these signs. It seems like it's a said and done decision, and this win's not going to make a difference, which is a shame because it seems like the 16 team is picking up pace. And granted, Allmendinger showed speed a lot last year, Tyler, running that all-star deal that they had with the 16 car, the all-star car. He ran, 20 races, finished top 10, 8 or 9 times. And it just hasn't panned out in a full-time Cup Series season. I'm sure there's more pressure. There's a lot more things you got to worry about in that grind. But really, really interesting to see how that's going to play out. It seemed like the 16 car is just not obvious right now on when that announcement's going to be, who's going to be driving that car. But I got to be thinking AJ Allmendinger's not back in the car just based on what we saw Sunday.
Yeah, maybe so. You might be onto something. I look at Kaulig Racing, and Dom, this is their second year of full-time racing, correct? In the Cup Series, you know, with the charter and everything. They have 2 charters. And I got to say, up until this weekend, they have been one of the most disappointing teams in the Cup Series because they came up around the same time of Trackhouse in 2311. Before they were even a full-time team with the charter, AJ Allmendinger goes to Victory Lane at the Indy Road Course and it's like, all right, they're here to play. You know, we've heard Matt Kaulig said that he loves winners, you know, that he's trophy hunting and all that. and there hadn't been those trophies that they'd been looking for. And, Justin Haley ends up leaving, and now this uncertainty with AJ Allmendinger, not finding the consistency. Things have not gone well. And to make matters worse, like, no offense to any Daniel Hemrick fans out there, but I don't think Daniel Hemrick is the solution that they should have been looking for. Like, to me, I wonder, like, why this team can't figure it out. They had such a successful Xfinity program, but it has been a struggle for them to compete at the Cup level. They have money, they have resources. I know ECR engines have not been that great really since midsummer, but this might have been the breakthrough they needed, because it has been a rough go at it for them at the Cup level as of late.
Well, Las Vegas, Homestead, Martinsville, there's all going to be way different tracks than what we saw at the Charlotte Road Course, but a win gives a team natural momentum. Momentum, as we know in NASCAR, is very real. And maybe this is the kick in the pants they need to finish out the year well. And who knows what's going to happen with that, right? And Tyler, I think we were talking earlier too, Chandler Smith seemed like he was kind of a lead candidate possibility for that role. And now, at the time of the taping of this show, he's being asked to be released out of his multi-year deal with Kaulig Racing to go back to Toyota Racing Development and work with Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024. We'll see what comes of that. Another name they got floated around, Matt DiBenedetto. But I really think this all comes down to the almighty dollar. Justin Haley not really necessarily bringing a lot of funding to the table, and Matt Kaulig running this with the Leaf Filter company that he owns. And I feel like that gets old. That has to get old. We saw that get old with Barney Visser in the 78 team. That got old years ago with was it Dyegard Racing in the 80s and Cliff Stewart. A lot of these independent owners.
And Cup racing is a whole lot more expensive than Xfinity racing.
Absolutely. So you gotta figure, you want your team to be successful. It's not necessarily that you want a paid driver. You got to be able to pay the bills. You got to be able to have somebody in there that's going to be able to help keep not only the lights on, but your 15, 20, 30 people that depend on those paychecks at that race team.
Yeah. But a big day for AJ Allmendinger. Happy for AJ and for him to get that win. Long time coming, and it was awesome to see.
Yeah.
The race itself, I'll be honest, Dom, looking at the highlights and everything, AJ led most of the race. It wasn't much of a race up front. The story of this race was, the guys that got eliminated, of course, but then, the problems that occurred, of whether it was mechanical failures or the crashes and all that from behind, AJ never really left this race in doubt. I know William Byron got close to his rear at the end of the race, but it was always AJ's to lose. It was really the action, was really about everywhere else but up front.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say at the beginning of the race, too, Tyler Reddick looked like the strong car. 2311 looked really strong. I even made the comment that Bubba Wallace really stepped it up this playoffs. I got to give credit where credit's due. And that 23 car looked really fast. When do we ever talk about Bubba Wallace running well at a road course, qualifying in the top 5, running inside the top 10? I believe he collected stage points at 1.2. And granted, the race didn't fall the way he would have liked. But there were some good comers and goers. But more often than not, you saw that 16 car up front when it counted. Chase Elliott leading laps. Had strategy fallen a different way with the cautions, and maybe we'd be talking about Chase Elliott winning that race. But the dominant car got the win, much like how we saw with Michael McDowell at Indy, William Byron at Watkins Glen. If you started out front or had a really good opportunity to race up front, you were going to finish up front unless it was something you were doing. And we did see that with AJ Allmendinger this weekend.
Yeah, certainly. Now let's talk about the NASCAR playoff picture. One guy in particular, Dom, as we transition to the playoffs, Denny Hamlin, you talk about timing, secured the point seed in those first 2 stages, then has a problem in that final stage. Denny is very fortunate that things happened when they did and didn't affect him. Now the points reset, and here he is just, 9 points back from the lead, like nothing ever happened.
Absolutely. That's what a great regular season does. And to even take that a step further, his teammate, Martin Truex Jr., I think this was Jonathan Field of the Racing Experts, our editor, that had said this. And if I'm quoting the wrong person, I apologize. But under the current format where you have the round of 16, the round of 12, and so forth, this is the first time that you have any driver advance on from the round of 16, from the round of 12 to the round of 8 as a playoff contender without scoring a top 10 finish within the first 6 races of the playoffs. You want to talk about consistency through the regular season and paying off in the playoffs. Martin Truex Jr. is very thankful he had all the points he collected, all the stage wins, all of the race victories, because that has been able to carry that team. His best finish, I believe, is 16th or 17th. Now, Kansas is the outlier in there where he had the crash on lap 3. Hard to say where he was going to finish there, but you got to imagine 6 races. He even said it. Truex said in his post-race comments, that's not going to cut it in this run. You have to run up front. You have to lead laps. 2 of the 3 wins are likely to go to playoff guys based on past trends, and that's what Truex said. We're going to have to step ourselves up, and he knows it himself.
So the playoff standings now, the 8 that are there, William Byron is your leader with 41 points. Truex second, 36. Hamlin third with 32. Kyle Larson fourth with 24. Chris Buescher fifth with 21. We have Christopher Bell with 16 points. Tyler Reddick also with 16, and Ryan Blaney with 14 as your 8 that have advanced on. Dom, let's start off the top. William Byron had a chance to win this past week. We mentioned, he made a late charge there. He's got 6 wins, which is double any other playoff driver remaining at this point. Clearly, that 24 team is still the team to beat here.
I got to imagine, too. I know setups change, and there's so much that doesn't really carry over that maybe would have carried over 20 or 30 years ago. But you got to think, you've won the March Las Vegas race, and you're coming back to this opening round of 8 race in Vegas this weekend. You got to think there's some momentum there. You got to think there's a lot of confidence in that 24 camp. Who's to not say that they can't go out and sweep and go make that first playoff championship 4 appearance in the Cup side?
Yeah, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. Denny Hamlin, meanwhile, got 3 wins. We've seen him run, for the most part, other than this last week at Charlotte, pretty well throughout this playoff to this point. And taking on, kind of the outspoken villain role of some sorts. I know that Jeff Gordon and him had a little bit of back and forth the last couple of days here. I like this Denny Hamlin. And you and I have talked about it all throughout the season. He has taken a much different approach than what we've seen his entire career. He's loose, and the way that he's approached this playoff, basically just giving no Fs, right? I mean,
Yes.
he was out there acting like he's got nothing to lose at this point.
Absolutely. He said maybe he has. He said he's come to grips without winning a championship, that he could finish his career without a title. And maybe when you get to that point, Tyler, and you really believe that mentality, it's just that I don't give a you-know-what mentality, and I'm just going to go out and do my thing and be the best driver I can. And maybe it's that mentality that has carried him differently in 2023. It is definitely a different Denny Hamlin.
Yeah. Byron and Hamlin, I feel like, are the favorites to win that championship when we get to Phoenix here. Who do you think is the next guy that could play spoiler, that could get in the mix, that could go on a run here in the rest of this playoff run?
Well, yeah, that is such a great question, and very convenient for me, because I think it would be that 4th guy on the grid, with Kyle Larson being the 4th seed now in this round of 8, who has advanced to the championship 4, and he won at Phoenix in 2021. Kyle Larson and the 5 team can really get it done. If they can, Cliff Daniels and Kyle Larson are not afraid to go outside of the box and go with some radical changes. And Cliff Daniels, of all the crew chiefs you hear on the radio, he knows how to get the best out of Kyle Larson and how to bring out the best in him and just pep talk him on the radio. And it's not like this rah coach thing. He really knows what he's doing on top of that pit box, gets the most out of his driver. And that's a good leader right there at the number 5 team.
Yeah, I think so. I think that 5 team is going to be interesting. We heard this week Denny Hamlin say that he's not taking things anything easy on Tyler Reddick, that his number 1 priority is still the 11 team, and rightfully so. Tyler Reddick, of course, has a win in this playoff. He's got 2 on the year. Tyler Reddick, for me, is interesting because Dom, based on the regular season, Tyler Reddick wasn't supposed to still be here, and he's got to win in the playoff. That 45 car has been running better as of late here. If anyone's going to potentially crack the party and knock out one of those top four, Byron, Truex, Hamlin, or Larson, I know a lot of people are going to talk about Chris Buescher, and rightfully so with the season Chris Buescher's had, breakout year with 3 wins. But I got my eyes on that 45 car, Tyler Reddick. I think they're starting to put it together the right time here.
Here's the thing, too, and I think you might agree with me on this with Reddick, and I'll put Christopher Bell in the same category. Great out of the Toyota camp. Those drivers looking as good as ever. Christopher Bell taking those poles at the beginning of the playoffs. Tyler Reddick looking a lot less flawless. But that's the thing. These drivers have to be flawless through these playoffs. We've seen Reddick's team on pit road making mistakes. We've seen Christopher Bell with the mental mistakes that he's acknowledged through some of these rounds of the playoffs. The 45 and the 20 piece together full races where you're earning stage points and knock off potentially a victory. I wouldn't be surprised if we were talking about 2 of these 4 playoff championship 4 drivers being Tyler Reddick and Christopher Bell. But that's the key, Tyler. They need to piece full races together. Can they do that?
It's the $1 million question. I think everybody wants to know, can they do that or not? The upcoming playoff schedule for this round, the round of 8. Let's tell you about that real quick here. We begin in Las Vegas this weekend with the South Point Casino 400. Then next weekend, we go to Homestead, Miami for the Mobile One 400. And then we wrap up the round with Martinsville with the Xfinity 500. Very interesting setup here, Dom. 2.5-mile tracks that are very different from each other, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then go short track racing at Martinsville for that final playoff race before the championship round here. I think that you are going to see your typical names. I'll put it this way. I don't see there being too many surprises because these are your quote unquote bread and butter tracks that the cream should rise to the top at.
You would think so. And I think maybe a name that could rise to the top this weekend at Vegas, only because they've had more preparation, being locked into this whole round, 3 weeks to prep their car. He's never won at Las Vegas, but he's won poles. He's led a bunch of laps, finished top 5 countless times. Ryan Blaney in the 12th team. Got to think that they're going to be a factor this weekend in Vegas. And then you look at Homestead, the first name that pops in my head is Kyle Larson, last year's winner, runs the high line like anybody. So well at running that racetrack. Tyler Reddick is so well at that place as well. And then you look at the short track at Martinsville, William Byron and that team have been the best well-rounded team, in my opinion, in the 2023 Cup Series season. And I feel like that track would just play into his driving style. You're going to have a lot of these front runners be guys that are in that round of 8. They have made it this far for a reason, and they'll be running up front for that reason.
Yes, definitely so. Dom, got plenty to discuss in our news and notes segment this week. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with some more silly season. On Tuesday, October 10th, it was announced on his social media, and I believe there's going to be more to the announcement, that Carson Hocevar is going Cup racing starting in 2024. Carson Hocevar will replace Ty Dillon in the number 77 Spire Motorsports Chevrolet entry in the Cup Series in a multi-year deal starting next season. Hocevar made his Cup Series debut with Spire Motorsports this past season when Corey LaJoie stepped in for a one-race deal for a suspended Chase Elliott at the Gateway race in June. Along with those duties, Carson Hocevar has been racing with Legacy Motor Club, replacing Noah Gragson after he asked for the release of his contract earlier this year. And Tyler, I got to say, that's a good move. We've seen consistency with Carson over the last 6-7 weeks. And he even said, I think in one of his comments, I feel like God built this car for me. It's just, there's something about this car that plays into his driving style, and he's getting the most out of that equipment. I got to imagine he's going to be doing that next year in that 77 team.
Well, he's a tall guy. He's like 6'5", and this is the biggest stock car we've ever seen. So maybe that has something to do with it of some sorts. But Carson Hocevar has done a hell of a job when he's gotten the chance to go Cup racing. You know, what is he? He's only 22 years old, if that. I mean,
what the heck were we doing at 22, Tyler?
right? I mean, he is doing an incredible job. I normally, Dom, am of the belief of that you should go through each series and get plenty of seat time and experience. But Hocevar has, filled in Cup racing and been competitive and, outrun his competitors, done a great job with multiple teams, getting to ride for Spire, for Legacy Motor Club, and done a really good job. And he's proven that he's more than ready to go Cup racing. And for that Spire team too, I think that's a good role for him to jump into. When you think about this, Dom, he's not being asked to go hop into a Gibbs car and try to go make the playoffs. He's being asked to go elevate that Spire team, which you look at their last couple drivers, they don't really have much more to go from the bottom than up from here at this point, because the performance of that 77 car the last few years has not been good. So the level of expectation for Hocevar is not that high right now, which that's good for a rookie driver, I think, in his situation.
Absolutely. I think Ty Dillon is your lowest of all drivers that have made every start this year, all 33 races, by a mile as far as the points acquired, point standings, etc. And I think it could even be safe to say, Tyler, let's call a spade. Corey LaJoie and Ty Dillon are not getting the same equipment, or at least that's what it appears to be on the surface. Maybe that changes next year, and I could just be looking at something that's not there. But you got to imagine Carson Hocevar will crack the top 30 in points, score a couple top 10 finishes at the very least. If trends continue from this year into next year, Carson Hocevar will elevate that program, and that will be a successful season for that organization.
Yeah, I think so. Good find there with Carson Hocevar there. What else we got going?
Couple more headlines here. So the Homestead race we were just talking about has a new title sponsor. And we typically don't cover sponsor news, but this one is just too good to not discuss. The Homestead Miami Speedway race, the following the Las Vegas race weekend, will be renamed the Forever 400, presented by Mobil One. Mobil One paying tribute to the retiring Kevin Harvick. And Harvick's done at the end of the season. Tyler kind of gives those feels of when Phoenix Raceway renamed it to Jeff Gordon Raceway for the day in 2015. Maybe not quite that level, but really cool to see a NASCAR owned track, or just a track in general. All these tributes they've been doing for Kevin Harvick, and kind of like a Jeff Gordon-esque kind of right off into the sunset here. Hey, we're gonna have your name attached to the race. So whatever the record books show for that race, Kevin Harvick's name will be attached to it.
Yeah, very cool. It would have been awesome if he would have gotten the win at Talladega after everything went about, of the win being the second place finish taken away. Maybe it wasn't so great that he didn't win that. But, going to a place that he's won a championship at, that he's had success at there at Homestead, it'll be really cool. And I know that we've talked about all year, Dom. We've known that Kevin Harvick was retiring, and he made that well known. But I still feel like that kind of has been pushed to the wayside of sorts, that it's been kind of forgotten about, as crazy as that seems. The season's been so exciting, so entertaining, and maybe because it's not a Jeff Gordon or Jimmy Johnson or Dale Jr., but maybe Kevin hasn't gotten the fanfare that he really deserved, and this should be good for that.
It should be. And you look at the number, 60 wins and not missing a race since April of 2002, and one of the longest consecutive start streaks in Cup Series history. There's a lot to celebrate with Kevin Harvick, and of course the way he took over the premier ride at Richard Childress Racing with the death of Dale Earnhardt, and just being thrust into that role. There's not. It doesn't seem like there's as much appreciation for Kevin Harvick as there should be, like you said. He is a very underrated driver, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. Matt Kenseth in the news.
Speaking of retired drivers, Matt Kenseth is coming back to the sport, but in a different role and capacity. It was announced on Tuesday, October 10th, Legacy Motor Club will be employing Matt Kenseth in a competition director sort of role effective immediately. So Tyler and I were talking about this before coming on air, and from what we gather on this role, Matt Kenseth is going to be working somewhat like a driver coach role, working with Eric Jones and with John Hunter Nemechek come 2024. But Jimmy Johnson hired him effective in October of 2023 in preparation, you got to imagine, for the next season. That's a great hire, Tyler. What better to learn from somebody who's won a championship, who's won a Daytona 500, a Southern 500, and arguably has the best dry sense of humor. You got to imagine that's going to jive well with everybody he works with.
Well, and there's an interesting irony to this, that he is essentially going to be the driving coach of some sorts of Eric Jones, the man who took his ride at Joe Gibbs Racing. Like, to me, that's a funny storyline. I know that was years ago, and I'm sure there's not any bad blood towards Eric Jones, because, Eric Jones, it's not his fault that Matt Kenseth lost his ride there in that circumstance. But it is funny how these things circle back the way that it is. But you got Jimmy Johnson there. You got Richard Petty, of course, there, and Matt Kenseth. Like, they have incredible personnel. Now they just need results to deliver themselves. And this is a guy, too, that we saw when thinking about these circumstances, Dom, with this transition to Toyota. This is a guy in Matt Kenseth we saw have immediate success after all those years of running Ford when he switched to Toyota. Granted, different car and everything, but he can help this team through this circumstance of knowing that he's done this before.
Certainly. I mean, he made that swap over from Roush Fenway in 2012 to Joe Gibbs in 13. He went from barely qualifying for the playoffs the year before and getting some lucky super speedway wins that included Daytona 500 to 7 wins, flat out dominating at different types of racetracks and coming up just short to Jimmy Johnson in the title line, and had that consistency throughout his 6-year career he had at Joe Gibbs Racing. So Kenseth, Toyota, Eric Jones, seems like there's some sort of reunion, some sort of thing here, and really cool that Jimmy Johnson's pulling all these different pieces with the team. I'm liking what Legacy Motor Club is doing in 2024, and it seems like they're trying to right the ship, because we know this year was a very disappointing season. I feel like Johnson's putting a lot of pressure on the organization to perform in 24, but you're bringing in, you're making the right moves and surrounding yourself with the right people, and that's what's going to be the big difference here. That big key is getting people involved, and they have some really good people involved with that organization.
Yeah, I think so. Now, I got to bring up one thing real quick while we're on news and notes headlines. Front of the show, Brett Baer, Fox News special report, obviously done a lot of work with David, is going to be back on a Cup car this weekend for another friend of the show, BJ McLeod, in their Live Fast Motorsports car, the 78 Chevrolet, for his To Rescue the Constitution book that just came out this week. They got a special paint scheme and everything. I love it, Dominic, when we see people we like from different worlds come together and make this work. Like, our friend Matt Jennings was behind it all, putting it together. And, BJ and Matt Tiff, of course, great guys in their organization. And Brett Baer, of course, he's terrific as well. I mean, I that's what I love, just from a personal standpoint, is seeing guys we know would, love and respect from different avenues come together and do something cool like this.
Well, it's motorsports. Motorsports brings people together, like how the same music brings people together. Music doesn't care where you came from. It'll bring you together. And that's what motorsports does here. You have people from all these different walks of life and different backgrounds, and people that have come from different parts of the country and different parts of the world. But what's that common thread? The love of motorsports and the love of fast cars. And I'll be out there in Vegas this weekend, so I look forward to seeing how that car looks in person.
Yeah, that'll be great. For sure. Dominic, what else we got going?
We'll wrap up news and notes this week. Of course, we usually end it with our odds and looking at the odds-on favorites. NASCAR, Las Vegas odds. You can't end a show without talking about that. And your opening odds for the South Point 400 include Kyle Larson at 9-2. You have Denny Hamlin and William Byron at 11-2. And your lowest ranked driver of the drivers that are still eligible for the championship, maybe a good pick here, Tyler, if you're placing a bet on the race. Chris Buescher sits at 16-1 odds for the South Point 400.
I don't know how William Byron's not the favorite. He's got 6 wins on the year. These tracks are what he's best at. And he won there earlier this year. Like, to me, maybe Vegas is overthinking. Maybe they know something we don't, which happens from time to time with Vegas. But William Byron, for me, I don't know how in the world he's not the favorite this weekend.
I would agree with that. Again, he's won, and in that momentum, you got to think there's some natural confidence that comes with that. You've won that race earlier this year. You know it's going to be somebody in the playoffs getting that advancement to the championship 4 race that wins, in my opinion, like how we have seen the last few years. We saw that with Joey Logano last year. And you go on and you have 3 weeks to prep. Of course, you're going to be on your A game for Phoenix. I'm telling you, man, Ryan Blaney, I believe he's at 12-1 odds for the Las Vegas race this weekend, at least in opening odds. That might be a solid pick right there, too. You have all this time to prep. You've run so well there. What a better way to close off your first Las Vegas win to get your first Champion 4 appearance.
All right. Time for our mailbag segment where you guys submit questions to us on Facebook, Twitter, and by email at Star Podcast on Facebook and X. Also email davidstarpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us there. Our first question comes from Ken, and I think we have an answer to this based on something we talked about earlier in the show. Ken asks, I'm wondering about the seemingly strange performance fall off of the RCR number 18. Performance escalated and fell off. Any theory? And Ken, I got to tell you, Dominic and I think we might be onto something here. What's going on there?
I think so. We were talking about it before the show, and man, and the other thought I thought too, Tyler. I mean, you have an engine program, and you have all these teams that are working. Is it a possibility that resources are being spread a little too thin, and there's a lot more that's being asked, a lot more stress on the people building these engines? Because it seems like after you have the win with Ross Chastain in June, and then you have Shane Van Gisbergen at the Chicago Street Course in July, there's been a big tank fall off since then.
Yeah, it has. So that ECR engine program, think about this. So in the Chevy camp, Dom, you basically have 2 sides, the Hendrick engine side and the ECR engine side. Hendrick's been consistently good all year with 2 teams, not everybody, but with 2 teams, the 5 and the 24, the 88, the 48 and the 9 have sucked. And then everybody at the ECR side has basically been down since beginning of, August or mid-July. I mean, really, Dom, I would point to that based on all that data and the results, what we're seeing out of the 24 and the 5 car right now is an anomaly compared to literally everyone else in the Chevy camp.
Yeah, you're not wrong, because William Byron's having a career year, 6 wins. Like you've mentioned, Kyle Larson's looked as great as ever, but everybody else has just been a little bit off. And like I've said in the past on this show, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman having great years compared to most drivers, but unacceptable to Hendrick Motorsports standards. Kyle Busch, 3 wins, looked like the Kyle Busch of old, and we really haven't seen anything from him. And since that win at Gateway, I think was it 2 top 5 finishes since then, and looked very lackluster in the playoffs. Kaulig Racing looked down. Trackhouse Racing has looked down. Yeah, it's been a very strange year to be a Chevrolet driver if you're not William Byron or Kyle Larson.
Yeah, and I wonder how those conversations are going to be this offseason. If the 24 car or the 5 win the championship, then Chevrolet, I think, is going to look past a lot of their issues and soak up that championship and all that. But if they don't, there's going to be some soul searching and some figuring out what can we do differently here and take those steps forward. Because, Dom, it's almost a scenario where, yes, the championship would do them great, and that's the ultimate goal. But if they don't win the championship, I think their problems within the organization, if they win the championship, then the problems within the Chevy camp could get overlooked.
They absolutely could. David has said it so many times on the show. Winning fixes a lot of things. And you win that championship, you got on top for the 2024 season, you're going to overlook a lot of the shortcomings and the shortfallings of the 2023 season.
And that could carry over into next year. I mean, this is the same car, and we haven't heard any big changes to the car for next year. I mean, you pick up basically right from where you left off.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And momentum is going to be very real. And you have 90 days from the championship race to Daytona. That's just going to energize whoever wins the championship more, especially if it's the Chevy teams. They're going to be so thrilled. It'll be, you hope it's not a hangover season in the next year, but that momentum will be there.
All right. Next question from the inbox comes from Aaron. Aaron wants to know, guys, I thought the schedule was underwhelming that was released last year. What was your thoughts on what NASCAR put together? Aaron, I'll start off with this one, and then we'll go to Dominic here. 100% I agree. The schedule was underwhelming. The Montreal deal falling apart at the 11th hour. We were told back in July that it was pretty much a done deal. Get your passports ready and all that. But it wasn't just that, Dom. Like, for Daytona not to be the regular season finale. And, I'll say this. I know the tradition of Darlington having the Labor Day weekend race, but I mean, let's be real. Who gives a shit? I don't have to have Darlington on Labor Day weekend. If we got to push things back to accommodate the Olympics and all that, or swap dates, we had something figured out, something great with Daytona being the regular season finale. That felt right. It was awesome. It's badass. What if even just, making the playoffs start a week earlier or whatever it may be? Like, if we had something good there and NASCAR had something figured out, like, why couldn't you be flexible? Or Daytona Labor Day weekend would have been awesome, or something like that. Like, to me, it wasn't just the Montreal thing. That was disappointing. But just some of the other decision making, we've been told all this by Ben Kennedy, and about the international expansion and some of these great ideas they had. And at the end of the day, we got rid of one of the best things on our schedule of Daytona as the regular season finale. And we ended up adding in Iowa. Nothing against Iowa Speedway, but like, of all that hype, and we're going to Iowa, they wanted to go to that track 10 years ago. Why didn't we go there 10 years ago when it was brand new?
Better late than never, I guess, with Iowa. Maybe I was a little more amped up about the Iowa thing, but you're saying my thoughts exactly on everything else, especially Daytona. Look, Daytona as a competitor, I'm sure, as the teams. Okay, let's back up a little bit. When you had this 2014 format come in where you had 16 drivers make the playoffs, you win and you're in kind of deal. You get to Daytona, and that was the July race until 2020, and that was it. Nobody really had anything to look forward to. I think everybody in everyday life, Tyler, you need some sort of hope. You need something to look forward to. You had a crappy ass season. You still know you can be one of the 38 guys to go out there and win at Daytona in late August and still right the wrong and make the playoffs. And I feel like the magic of that is taken away. Maybe it was a little bit of artificial excitement, but for the teams, for the drivers, for the fans, most importantly, who make the sport possible, everybody wants a little bit of hope. And having Daytona as that last race of hope is taken away in the 2024 schedule. Now, is it a permanent thing? We'll have to wait and see. Maybe the Olympic thing made it a unique thing. Okay, we'll try something new here. But if you had something figured out, I'm with you. An 11 race playoff schedule is a unique thing. Could have been something to look at. But that hope, you're dashing the hope of competitors, the people who work on these cars, and the race fans who root for these drivers, especially if there's a season going disarray. and they have Daytona to look forward to as that last regular season championship race before the championship races. It's just the excitement is robbed for me, Tyler, when I hear that.
Well, and then the other thing too. So I know NBC asked for the Olympic break. They need it. I get it. They have to dedicate themselves fully to the Olympics come summertime. Comes with the territory. I totally understand.
Yeah.
But like, what if instead of having this break, why don't we work out a trade where what if Fox did 2 races at that point in the year and NBC does 2 races earlier and work with your partners that way? Because Fox's football coverage doesn't start till September anyway. So why wasn't that a possibility? Instead of this 2-week break that's going to delay the end of the season for everybody, like I think that we could avoid it altogether if we just gotten Fox involved in some sorts, work out a trade of sorts.
Well, like you see with the NFL and so much flexibility with broadcast partners and something that a lot of these deals you see where games get flexed and moved, stuff that probably wasn't even thinkable 20 years ago. I think that
we saw in the COVID year back in 2020 where we went back and forth between Fox and NBC races.
Yeah, who's not to say it could have happened again this year, right? So yeah, it would be nice to, or for next year, I should say, it would be nice to see that. And I believe too, Tyler, on the underwhelmingness of that schedule too, there's no off weeks, if I remember correctly, from the early half. The only off weeks are going to be this Olympic break, and that's it.
Yeah, that is it. And the Xfinity schedule only has one standalone weekend. They're in Portland. Otherwise, they're racing adjacent to the Cup schedule every week. I think I'll say this, Dom, it's twofold when I look at the schedule. Like, it's a hell of a lot better than what it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes.
But I expected more progress, more changes by now. I do, we're on average, what is it, about 1 or 2 different new races a year right now, which isn't bad, but it could be further along here. Like, take example, IndyCar, for example. Other than the Indy 500, you have, and Long Beach, those 2, you have no idea what the races are going to be year by year, and it's always piecing the puzzle of the date and the track and all that here. Like, NASCAR, a lot of it is set in its ways. And as far as the Iowa thing goes, I'm afraid for the folks of Iowa that this is going to be like false hope. Like, are they just a placeholder for until Montreal comes around or until California Speedway comes back? Like, that would suck if you're somebody from Iowa. You're just a placeholder, because that's what happened to Road America. They ended up being just a placeholder until the Chicago Street Course came about. Is that what's going to happen with Iowa here, where they just hold the spot, keep the seat warm, basically, and then someone else is going to come in and take their date? Like, that's kind of shitty.
That's food for thought, though. I hadn't really thought about it like that. And you're right, because Road America was on the schedule for 2 years, and that was it. And we have the Chicago Street Course for at least another 2 years. And if that doesn't happen, what else is going to happen after that? Are they going to put a placeholder event until something bigger and better comes along? Those fans in that Midwest, we were talking about it last week. NASCAR is going all in on this Midwest expansion and having more Midwest presence. You're really going to disappoint the fans out there if this is a 1-year deal, 2-year deal.
And you could make enemies, really, if you just show up and leave. I mean, you almost think, Dom, let's say, my theory here about the Iowa being a potential placeholder. Let's say it's a placeholder. Would NASCAR be better off, just naming a track here, doing 2 races at Homestead as opposed to just these one-offs at Iowa and screwing those people over after that? Like, if it's a placeholder, you might as well go to Homestead or something like that again.
Homestead was a great track, and we've been there before, and you can tell
right.
Fans are very passionate down there in South Florida, but they're also very.
And you can make it very clear. Just be upfront with those people, like, "Hey, we're giving you this race for now, but like, it's not the long-term plan." Like, I think the Iowa folks are being sold a bag of goods, convinced, like, "Hey, we're here," when there's no guarantee they will be.
It's not guaranteed, and it's only a 1-year deal as of right now. I mean, it could be more, and I might have missed that along the way, but yeah, those fans have been wanting a race up there for a long time. They have it. I think there's going to be a lot of bitterness, rightfully so, if they only have it for a 1 or 2 year deal.
Yeah, for sure. Dom, we're out of time, but before we wrap up and go today, what's going on with you this week, man?
This week I'll be out in Las Vegas. We'll be covering the NASCAR race. I have a full team out there with the racing experts, with our Jonathan Field, friend of the show, another friend of the show, the Joe Larquente. And why am I slipping on our fourth guy? Well, they're going to kill me. Oh, Joseph Aigo, our guy from Arizona, is going to be on our team as well. So we have a good team. We have a good team this weekend. And I was telling you guys last week on the show too, we took a little family trip out to Florida, and it was really quick. A little bit of business, a little bit of pleasure. And on the business side of stuff, a lot of fun to work with Jeff Bodine, continuing on the book. We were picking out pictures, Tyler. So we're getting really close to getting all that good to go. But we're working really hard with the trilogy, and that goal of having that book out around the Daytona 500. It's all coming together, and can't wait for you guys to see it.
Going from one side of the coast to the other in a week. I like that, Dom.
Yeah. What about you, Tyler? What's keeping you busy over the next few days?
That's a good question, because I am still actually figuring some stuff out for the weekend of what I'm going to do or not. But I will, by the time you're listening to this, folks, actually joining David for his smoke show with Tony Stewart there at Texas Motor Speedway Wednesday night. So by the time this is out, it would have already happened, but it certainly should be exciting. And, I've been around Tony Stewart, but never actually interacted with him one-on-one. So I'd love to get the chance to chat with Tony and pick his brain a bit, because he's awesome. I mean, Tony's a badass. One of the just greatest pure racers of all time. One of the best personalities the sport's ever seen. So I'd love to get a chance to chat with Tony. So that should be fun. And it should be a fun weekend. So certainly looking forward to all of that. Dom, we'll put the checkered flag out on this episode. Glad we still got to do this. You and I just kind of, get together and catch people up to speed. So much going on. We couldn't not have a show this week. But we'll be back here next week here on Let's Go Racing. As always, subscribe to the show. New episodes out each and every week. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review, or don't leave us one at all. Subscribe to the show, and make sure to hit that like button. We certainly would appreciate that. Follow us on social media, facebook.com/Star Podcast, X @Star Podcast, and you can email us, davidstarpodcast@gmail.com. He's Dominic Aragon. I'm Tyler Jones. Saying so long. It's been another edition of Let's Go Racing. We'll see you next week.